Before we start this video, I just want to let you guys know that this project will be on my GitHub and the link to that will be in the description below. I will also include links to each individual piece of code that we're going to be using in this project, just to save you time, because I'm going to be copying this code in instead of typing it all out, and then you guys can follow along by copying it in as well or typing it out yourself, whichever suits you the best. So to get started, we're going to create a new ASP.NET Core web application. I'm using the MVC project, which is Model View Controller, and I'm just using this particular because in a future video we might want to create the API, or using the APIs that we created, we might want to create a front end for them to display them. But in this video we're just going to be creating the endpoint, which is the API, and for this example we're going to be creating a dogs endpoint, which is just going to return a list of dogs and different variables for each dog. So let's get started. So we're going to click next. I'm going to call this the animal project and just set your path to whatever, but I just have mine default to this, and click next. Choose your framework. I'm using .NET 6 and that's because I'm on Visual Studio 2022. You can use different versions, either 5 or 7, depending on what you're using, but I'd recommend 5 and up, and this will work for them versions as well. So go ahead and just create the project. We're not going to use any authentication type or anything like that. We're just going to create. So with our project created here, I'm just going to run this in the background just so it's built out from the get-go. So we'll just do Control F5, and this is going to boot up our web application here, and you can see it's animal project, and we're given just the standard ASP.NET Core code here, but we're not going to be using this. This just shows that our project is running. So back in our solution, we're going to expand the controllers, and we're going to add a new one, a new controller, and we're going to use an API controller that is empty, and we're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this dog controller, and you can see here that it creates our controller with a route of API/controller, and then just another attribute of API controller. We're not going to mess around with any of this. We're just going to leave it as it is and start to create our get function essentially. So we're going to add an attribute here, which is HTTP get, and below this I'm going to do a public iActionResult dogs. And essentially what this means is when we route to /API/dog, that the default is going to be this function here on the when we're getting something. And essentially in this folder you would only have you'd have one get or another get that passes in like a single ID to retrieve just a single item, and then another one that returns just a list of data, which is what we're creating here. So next we're going to add a return new JSON result, and I'm just going to pass in hello world. Oops, a daisy. And let's just change that to lower. I'm going to do Control F5, and if we route to /API/dog, you'll see we get hello world, which is exactly what we want. This validates that our endpoint is working. So now we're going to create our model for the dog, which is going to be a new class, and I'm going to call it dog obj, and I have code here to paste in. So this is going to be the name of the dog, the breed, their age, their color, their weight, and if they're friendly or not. And then we can use this object in a list to then display about 10 different dogs and with different data. So back in our controller here, I have another snippet of code to add in, which is quite long because we're creating a list of dog objects. But if I paste this in here and scroll back up, essentially we're just creating a list of type dog object, and we're just creating new dog objects in here to populate the list. So it's just some static data giving each different dog object their own unique name, breed, age, color, weight, and if they're friendly or not. And we're just going to then return that on our front end, which could be used by through an API call later down the line. So we're going to replace this hello world with dogs, and if we do Control F5 again to build the project, we don't need this page, but we're back here on this controller that we had open last time. Before we refresh, this is what we had before, but now when we refresh, we're actually getting a JSON structure, which is an array of dog objects. So each dog is unique and has their own name, and then this data could be used on a front end to display it in a table or a list view, whatever it may be. And generally we would have this data in an SQL table that we can then use the entity framework to get all these dog breeds in one line of code, and then return them in the same way through a JSON result, resulting in the exact same as what we see here, just that it's a bit more cleaner but a bit more technical because we're integrating with a database. But this is to just demonstrate how to create an API, how to return data, and how to view that data, which is what we're seeing here. And alternatively, as time goes on, you can use a program called Postman, and we can add in a request here, which is a get request, and I'm just going to call this get dogs. Not that. Get dogs. And if we go back to our endpoint and just copy here, we're going to get the same result, but this allows us to test our APIs as we build them out in a more cleaner environment, because we can then create different endpoints that link in here but use different requests such as post or put and patch, which are all different attributes within our controller, and then we can test them as we go along, because you won't be able to test a post request just by going to a URL like this. We're better off using Postman because then we can see any errors that throw up. But that is it for this tutorial. In a future tutorial, we're going to get integrated with a database or create a new dog, and then eventually show this data on the front end using a front end framework like Vue.js, something simple. But that's it. I hope this video was useful. If you found it useful, please just let me know down below. If you'd like to see something else, also let me know, and just drop a like and subscribe just to support the channel, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Take care.